do believe that our body is always on our side, right until the very last breath that we take, or the very last heartbeat that we take, that happens. Our body is always trying to stay alive. And what some people who've maybe studied biology at some level have heard of this concept of homeostasis. And it says that, our body creates an array of reactions in order to try and maintain balance of some sort. Our modern day society can push our body's processes of homeostasis. It can push them to the limits and create or provide us with confusing signals, which make it hard for the body to return to health, full health. So we just have to be wise to that, and to be, in a way, control our environment, control our choices, so that we don't knacker out these regulatory systems that do return us to health. In our society, we've set the upper and lower limits and the signals that are coming into our body at different points than they were maybe 100 or so years ago, and this puts a strain on the system, and it comes at a cost.
What's happening, guys? My name is Tom, and I'm coming back at you with a brand new episode of Second Mind, the show that empowers you to be your greatest self and create a better world. For today's show, I'm in conversation with Dr. Ian Tennant, a man who is a specialist in helping people make inexpensive and simple choices that improve their health. Ian works with knowledge that's really on the frontiers of medical research and helps clients feel more energized and understand why the habits of healthy people actually work. He got his doctorate from the University of Edinburgh in clinical and surgical sciences, but he is also trained as a sports and remedial massage therapist and a holistic lifestyle coach. In his early career, Ian worked as a researcher for the Medical Research Council Centre for Inflammation Research, but now he spends most of his time helping clients face-to-face with health issues, including professional athletes and high-level entrepreneurs. Ian has also risen to conquer a lot of his own personal health challenges, putting chronic digestion and sinus issues into long-term remission, and learning how to manage his diagnosed heart condition while still maintaining high levels of physical activity. We cover a lot of ground in the discussions today, with our chat based around Ian's book called Restoring Balance. He presents a fantastic simple framework that we could all use when assessing and working to improve our health. The framework contains 6 polarities, with the idea that we must work to find a state of balance that is right for us and feels good inside each of these polarities. We unpack all of the polarities, which are light and dark, feasting and fasting, connection and independence, movement and stillness, technology and nature, and excitement and calmness. Ian gives a really handy breakdown of why each of these polarities matter, how they work, and what you can do to restore your own sense of balance. Trying to live a healthy lifestyle can seem so complicated as we're bombarded by so much information nowadays about this new diet and that new amazing health hack. But I feel Ian's model takes a refreshingly simple, big picture approach that can make a huge impact to your life. So whatever direction you're traveling, if you look through your health with Ian's pretty simple 6 polarities model, you'll be giving yourself a solid platform to grow and prosper. I really had a great time chatting with Ian, and I hope the discussions that we recorded offer a lot to you too. Peace. Let's do this. Ian, welcome to the Second Mind podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. How are you doing?
Morning, Tom. It's great to see you. I'm doing really well, actually. I've been down to the allotment first thing this morning and got some sunshine. We've had a real heat wave here in Peterborough. I don't know what it's like with you in Devon, but I do remember when I lived in Devon and I, spent some time with your mum, and all of the colleagues around there, that the weather always seemed to be nice, but sometimes a little bit more damp than what we get in the east of England.
Yeah, the weather can be a bit weird and changeable down in Devon. We have our own little microclimate, but that's the way we like it, I guess. We had a lovely sunny day yesterday. It's good to hear that you're outside getting that sunshine in the early morning. It does make a really big difference to the day.
It does, and hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about body clocks and how we set our body clocks during this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into that, I did want to introduce that you have your book that you've written called Restoring Balance. And over the last few days, I have been having a look through the book in anticipation of this conversation. I've been really enjoying the book and your writing style, because it has a way of not only giving great health advice that's scientifically backed, but it's also got a thread running through it of your own personal journey with health challenges. And I think that's fantastic because it makes it extremely relatable. And I just wanted to start off the conversation by giving you some space to talk about how your health challenges have influenced what you're up to in your career today.
Thank you. So yeah, I realized I was interested in health in my teenage years. I felt a little bit kind of like I was lagging behind with my energy levels. I knew that, or what I observed with my peers around me, sometimes they seemed a bit more sprightly and alive and quick in conversation. And I felt a little bit heavy, kind of bloated, my guts. I wasn't satisfied with my digestion, and my sinus and breathing was often, had congestion in my head as well. So, but I thought I had this kind of deep sense or knowing that it didn't have to be that way, and there must be a way that I can kind of solve these problems myself. And then I would, I'd hear little snippets of information. I remember one of them was reading in my uncle's Reader's Digest magazine. It was about the runner's high. And, as a teenager, we all want to we're curious about getting high one way or another, aren't we?
Exploring the world and its wonders. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, if there's a way that exercise can get you high, then, I want to try that. So this Reader's Digest magazine, it kind of listed this man told the story about how he went from, it's kind of like the couch to 5K kind of story, how he gradually built up his ability to go outside and jog and run until he got to the point where he got, an endorphin rush from exercise. So I'd had a few years where, as a teenager, kind of like lost interest in exercise, and this triggered me to start running again. I always kind of did okay at running at school with cross country, but I kind of got into this regular habit of going out 2 or 3 times a week and increasing the distance and the duration. And then I remember one summer's evening, I had my Sony Walkman on and I was running through the woods near to my house. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I was just like I was floating, like I wasn't even putting any effort into the strides to run. And the evening, the twilight kind of color from the sky coming through the trees just seemed more hyper real and brighter than normal. And I was like, wow, I've got the runner's high. This must be it. The music sounded even better than normal on the Walkman. So that was kind of, for me, that was proof at that age that you can do something to make yourself feel better and improve your health and well-being, and it can be free and simple and easy. And I'd like to say now that I don't think that all of our solutions to health and well-being are just about exercise. And it's possible to become addicted to exercise, especially intense aerobic exercise like running.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know myself, I've used it when I was had a kind of quite stressful time career-wise. I've used I used running as a kind of to medicate the stress of work, and that's there's a fine line between using something therapeutically and using it in a way that you become dependent on it.
Yeah.
So it's not, I'm not, the message which I want to get across to the viewers and listeners today is not about exercise being the cure for everything. It's part of a whole host of things we can do for free, and simple things to do. And sometimes it's about doing less than doing more. So that was the beginning of my health journey. Then I also heard other little bits of information that seemed to jump off the shelf to me. One of them was, I remember I was sitting having my hair cut once, and there was the radio was on, and a guy was talking about how he'd been diagnosed with cancer, and he was due to go and have an operation and some treatment. And what he did was in preparation for that, he radically changed his diet and, started eating loads of fruit and vegetables, fresh fruit and vegetables, which he hadn't done before. And the whole story was kind of saying that, he believed that this helped him during his recovery from cancer, was changing his diet. And as a kid, I didn't like vegetables at all. There was, one or two vegetables I liked, and I kind of avoided them all. So that little bit of information as well encouraged me to man up a little bit and eat some vegetables that I, as a kid, I was a little bit, just got stuck in this idea that I didn't like certain vegetables. So and it was like those similar things that I could, that there is a way to improve your mental well-being, your emotional resilience, improve relationships, and find a good work-life balance. All these things are possible, and they should be simple and free and easy, as long as we've got the right information and the right guidance to do them.
Yeah, it seems like through these small experiences that you had, you were getting a sense that actually in these incremental stages, you were learning how to kind of like talk to your body and influence your body through the way that you were living your life. And as you were saying, like exercise isn't a cure-all. It's just a tool that can be used. It's about having a good relationship with it. And it's the same with food. And it's interesting that you had all these small experiences that seem to contribute to this new perspective that you gained. I picked up in something in the book, actually. It wasn't in the book. It was in a talk that you did that I listened to. It was a masculinity conference. And you were saying that your body is always on your side. Maybe that's also featured in the book as well. But I was wondering if, you say this now, when you look back at your own health journey, do you feel like your body has always been on your side? Do you think the things that it was telling you were leading you to a better place despite being quite difficult at the time?
Yeah, I think that I still do believe that our body is always on our side, right until the very last breath that we take, or the very last heartbeat that we take, that happens. Our body is always trying to stay alive. And in the book, and what some people who've maybe studied biology at some level have heard of this concept of homeostasis. So this term was coined by a guy called Walter Cannon, and it says that our body creates an array of reactions in order to try and maintain balance of some sort, and this balance point is this process is called homeostasis, and it's the balance it's trying to create is ideal for life, basically. So we think of temperature regulation as an example of this. So we all know that if you feel unwell, one thing that medics will do, or you can do it yourself, is to measure your temperature. Has your temperature deviated from around 37 degrees C, which is what our core body temperature should try and stay. So that's an example of our body being on our side. It's always trying to keep our temperature at about 37 degrees, whether it, whatever the external environment is. If it's cold outside or if it's hotter than that, if it's sort of warm, too warm, our body will create these reactions to try and return to balance, this ideal conditions for life. So we know in extreme examples, we shiver if we're cold and we sweat when we're hot. So that's an example of the wisdom of our body. But sometimes it doesn't feel like our body's on our side. So when we feel unwell or tired or just feel groggy, then it can feel like our body's letting us down. Or if we've got some, long-term condition, then it's easy to think that our body is against us. And indeed, when we're, if you're sporty and active, I do, one of the things I do is hands-on therapy and massage. And I feel really lucky that I've got access to these tools, because lots of people who come to me are really upset because they feel like their body's just giving up on them because they've got this recurring injury. But actually, in that injury, in that pain and the inflammation that they're feeling, it's actually their body's drive or an attempt to repair itself. And it might not feel like that, but it's just the conditions aren't quite right for that repair process to go to completion. So yeah, our body is always on our side. There's this process called homeostasis, which is always, whilst we're alive, we're always attempting to get back to that. The big thing that I believe in, and that, it's probably come across in the book, is that our modern day society can push our body's processes of homeostasis. It can push them to the limits and create or provide us with confusing signals, which make it hard for the body to return to full health. So we just have to be wise to that, and to be, in a way, control our environment, control our choices, so that we don't knacker out these regulatory systems that do return us to health.
And that element of, our body being on our side to give us that power of balance is incredibly important. And we do often underestimate how our constructed world impacts on those forces that are working inside our body. But as you discovered with your own health journey, you can start to learn the mechanisms as to how you can influence balance from the actions that you take by controlling your environment and using your behavior to be able to influence those cycles and bring yourself back to that center point of health, essentially. So the book itself is called Restoring Balance. Why do you think balance is an important thing to strive for?
I think balance is important because it's, if we stay off balance for too long, then there's a risk that we'll these regulatory systems. So it's a little bit like I explained it, the homeostasis is a little bit like a temperature regulation system. So in your house or in an office or a workplace, we have a thermostat, don't we? So the thermostat keeps the room temperature usually around about 20 degrees C, and there's upper and lower limits to that. So if the cooling system will kick in if the room temperature goes too high. If it goes to maybe 23, 24, the fans will kick in. And then if the room temperature goes too low, if it drops to 17 or 18, then the heating, the boilers and the heating mechanisms will kick in. And that brings us back to the right temperature. And then the heating or the cooling will switch off. However, if we let's say you invited some people into your house who just come in from the it's the middle of winter, you've invited some people into your house who've just come in from a long walk in the cold, they've got all their coats on and they're shivering, they may be wet. You might boost the temperature for a little while, and so that they can take their coats off, get them dry, warm themselves up. But if you left that temperature high for all year round, it would be really costly to your electricity bill. It would put a strain on the heating system. It would waste fuel. And that's kind of what we do in our society. We've set the upper and lower limits, and the signals that are coming into our body at different points than they were maybe 100 or so years ago. And this puts a strain on the system, and it comes at a cost.
Yeah, and I think many people are sometimes not listening to the small reminders that they're getting on quite a regular basis, that the signs the body is showing that it is in a state of imbalance. And sometimes that unfortunately has to get to a place where then the body is so out of balance that it's going to give them some really big symptoms and, you know, put the brakes on their life in a much bigger way. I think it's maybe a symptom of the fact that we are not a very still society, and we're not very equipped in the modern day to slow down as much as we should, to be able to actually generate that connection with our body. We often I feel, treat our bodies kind of like machines, that we are just using them, and we sort of have this power over them to sort of tell them what to do and just get the right output, and then that's all I really care about. But it seems like having a relationship and a partnership is a much better way of looking at it, because we really do need to look after these systems, because maybe, you know, if you're not listening to those messages that your systems are telling you on a regular basis, then these can build up into huge chronic conditions way down the line. As humans, we're just not great at looking at things in those timescales.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, the point you just made about not listening to what your body is saying. So I think, you know, tiredness and sleep is a prime example of this. We, after we created artificial lighting, so, you know, traditionally this has been incandescent light bulbs, which allow us to light our homes and workplaces after the sun goes down. Before that, we might have had gaslight and candlelight and so on, and fire, other types of fires. But now we can have this kind of really bright, kind of clinical white, or it's referred to as blue light, 24/7. We can go shopping in a supermarket which is lit with this really bright LED lighting, and that kind of creates a wake-up signal. That, together with, you know, using caffeinated drinks, coffee and other drinks that have got caffeine in them, to override a sense of tiredness, means that, you know, people are often not getting enough sleep. They're overstimulated in many ways, and then they may feel tired and then get caught into this vicious loop of just, you know, taking more stimulants to overcome the feeling of tiredness. Maybe then you know, they might get headaches and then start taking painkillers to numb that kind of pain. Just think this becomes normal. You know, that during the first parts of the lockdown during the coronavirus pandemic, paracetamol and painkillers were, after toilet roll, were one of the things that people were scrabbling around for, because so many people rely on numbing signals from their body, these signals that were once quiet, but they've got up to the level of, they've gone past discomfort to a level of pain, and now they need to numb that pain. So yeah, you know, and in the book, there's a big section on making friends with tiredness. So if you feel tired, obviously there are conditions where tiredness is very serious, and I'm not saying ignore them, totally, disregard them. But if you're tired, just sleep. Have an early night, have a catch up, allow your body some deep rest rather than fighting against it. The other sort of thing I encourage is for people to practice meditative type practices where you're tuning into your body, listening into what your heart's doing, your breathing rate is doing, your digestion, all of these different cues from your body about how well you feel, and get to know the language of the body. And indeed, there's a big field of science studying this right now called interoception, which is trying to kind of understand the importance of signals and feelings from our body, and how, if people can sense them accurately and determine the right meaning from those signals, and then choose an appropriate action, how that can either that can be good for their health. But if they don't have a good sensitivity to their bodily feelings and can't accurately sense them, then it appears like this is linked to lots of different lots of different health conditions, and poor mental health, and even addictions as well.
Yeah. And having that really close relationship with the body it's so vital. But we won't be able to hear the messages, or the smaller messages that are coming through, unless we have that stillness. To be able to hear, you have to listen. So I think that's something that we could all make more space for in our lives. But I think the perspective that you've given the readers in your book by using your model of the six polarities I think that's a great way for people to start to think about balance in their own lives. It's a great jumping off point, because it really summarizes so many of those patterns that have been interrupted by our normal modern lives. And I was wondering if we could, through the journey of this conversation, go through some of those elements of the six balance polarities, and start to talk about why individually they are important. That we already touched on the light dark cycle. Maybe we could jump back in there, and to really describe why they're vital, and why it's a useful perspective to look through.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, because this point of balance, or homeostasis. It's actually, just to say something first, that's been updated in recent years, the idea of homeostasis, with something called allostasis, which says that the balance point, or the center point, the upper and lower limits can be moved up and down. And it includes our ability, because humans were really complex beings, and that's what the whole challenge with health is about these days, and that is that we can use past experience to change our behavior, and we can project forward with our mind and predict scenarios in the future which change the way we behave here and now. So and just using the simple example of body temperature again, I don't just shiver and sweat to regulate my body temperature. I also look at the weather forecast and decide what clothes I'm going to wear. I insulate my house, I close windows, I do other things to help support my body temperature, other than just these biological reactions of shivering and sweating.
Yeah.
And it's the same with every other aspect of health. So the six polarities, which you asked about, light and darkness are one of them. They're just like heat and cold. They affect our health, and our body has to respond to them. Calmness and arousal is the second one. So calmness is about that, like you said, that stillness, that feeling settled and rested, versus arousal, which is, you and I will have had to create a certain amount of alertness in order to carry out this interview now. So and that's good, but no one wants to be in a super alert or aroused state all the time. Otherwise it would be too stressful for the body, and we'd become fatigued. The third polarity is feasting and fasting. So food is definitely good for us, but it's also good to take a break, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that. The fourth polarity is movement and stillness. So we don't want to become too sluggish and couch potato-like, but we don't want to be running around like a crazy person all the time either. Connection and independence. So this is about the fact that we're social creatures. So at the moment, during social isolation, some people have been struggling with this, with the loss of touching other people or close eye contact. We regulate each other through social interaction. The other side of that is independence, and it's good to have both your time alone to reflect and to reconnect with ourselves. So that's the fifth polarity, connection and independence. And the final one is technology and nature, which is more of a modern day polarity, which I put in at the end of the book. If I'd written it, 20 years ago, I might not have thought it was so important as it is today.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're the six polarities, but light and dark. Did you say we should start there?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that is such a pivotal point. And the light-dark cycle is when you look around in nature entirely thrives with all of its internal systems around that light-dark cycle. So to think that we're any different would be silly. We are absolutely plugged into that.
We are completely plugged into that, and the more I carry on with this health journey, the more I realize how powerful light actually is for our health, and full spectrum natural light, as opposed to artificial light. So each one of us has got this kind of master body clock in our head. It's just between it sits in a place in our brain. It's a relatively small cluster of neurons compared to the billions of neurons in each one of our brains. There's just about 20,000 neurons, and this master body clock is called the supracosmic nucleus. And these 20,000 neurons, they oscillate together to set all the other clocks in our body. So our digestion has a clock to it. That's why people will often feel their stomach rumbling at the same time each day. They'll go to the toilet at similar times. They'll feel more alert and want to do exercise or to be active at different times of the day. So we've got these clocks, these rhythms or clocks throughout the whole of our body, but it's this master body clock, which kind of they're all calibrated to. Now, it's a two-way street, which with this body clock, how it's calibrated and set. So some levels of light is the most powerful signal to set the body clock. So we opened this talk with saying that I've been out to the allotment early this morning. So getting natural daylight on your skin and in your eyes early morning is one of the best ways you can set your body clock.
Yeah.
And avoiding too much artificial light after sunset or in the winter, late on in the evening, is another good way to set your body clock in a positive way. Because if we have too much artificial light in the evening, then it's going to stimulate this supracosmic nucleus, and that will inhibit the production of a hormone called melatonin, which you may have heard of. Lots of people have heard of melatonin. And this is like a sleepiness hormone. So it makes us feel naturally inclined to want to fall asleep in the evening. So if you've got too much artificial light at night and, staring at flat screen devices is a powerful way to get bright white or bright blue light into your eyes late at night, but it will affect the quality of your sleep.
Yeah. It's odd because, the exact time when we probably need to be avoiding, or definitely need to be avoiding, that blue light is the time when a lot of us are centered around our screens the most. When people sit down and watch TV at night, it will be the most popular time for lots of shows on like the BBC or whatever. It will be that like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock window. And a few times I've not really realized, previously in my life, I've not really realized how bright the TV and laptop screens are. Actually, when I've like turned off the light in, say, my living room and left the TV on playing something, I actually realize how much light it's putting out there, because there's no other light source in the living room. There's no light in the ceiling, and you realize actually you're receiving. It's maybe it feels diluted because there's other light sources in the room, but actually you're getting a really powerful light coming through there, and the same when we are asleep as well. Sometimes people will have lots of electrical devices in their room that have these like on lights or like displays that are still on at night. And although these are really small, actually the body is able to pick up such finely tuned light sources, because, as we were saying before, it's such an important environmental factor to be aware of. Even if our eyes are closed, the skin is still able to pick up and detect light. So I was wondering if you could talk about how the skin in itself is able to do that.
Yeah, you're quite right. It's not just our eyes that detect light. Every part of our body detects light, and I'm really glad you've mentioned that point. So there's these molecules called opsonins, and we have certain types of them in our eyes, and they help us see. But indeed, they're in our skin as well, and we've got lots of blood vessels close to our, around our wrist here.
Yeah.
It's been shown that these opsonins around the surface of blood vessels receive light, and they may be involved in how dilated or contracted blood vessels are. So our body, responds to light, even small amounts of light when we're asleep. So absolutely try and make your bedroom environment as dark as possible at night, and that includes, even this phone I've got here. As you said, it's got like the on light at the bottom, at the top, that flashes at night. So if I have that in my room near my bed, then it will cast this kind of eerie light up my wall, this flashing light. And you might think, it's very weak, but actually your body's going to be receiving that, and it'll be affecting it on some level. So I encourage people to try and make their bedroom as dark as possible, and that includes switching off electrical devices, maybe even taking them out of the room. Some people might want to keep their mobile phone on airplane mode for emergencies, and that's if they need it in the night, if they're unwell or whatever, then that's fine. Just keep it, put a t-shirt over it and keep it a few meters away from your bed. That's much better than, I know people who have their smartphones under their pillow and they don't even put them on airplane mode. So yeah, that's one thing. Then use blackout curtains for the windows as well. So there may be strong street lighting. And that's it's not just about things in your home; it's light coming from outside. There was this fascinating study from the University of Exeter, done in collaboration with a university in Barcelona, and they studied. They looked at where new LED street lighting had been installed around cities and neighborhoods. And so this is the new LED street lighting. It's this kind of bright white lights, which you may have seen installed around your neighborhood. It's very different than the old kind of sunset orange colored street lights that we used to have. And what they found was there was a correlation between the installation of these LED street lighting and an increase in breast cancer and prostate cancer. And you might think, well, that's, that sounds unreal. But actually, when we think about it from what we just talked about, if you've got bright light coming through your window all throughout the night, then that's going to inhibit melatonin via this, suprachiasmatic nucleus. Melatonin is a hormone which instructs the cycles, which influences the cycles of other hormones in our body. Breast cancer and prostate cancer are influenced by hormones, so it's well known that breast cancer is influenced, the chance of getting breast cancer is strongly influenced by estrogen levels. Melatonin and estrogen are linked. So, having this 24/7 switched on society where we've got light all the time, we've got noise and entertainment all the time, we've got, caffeine to keep us alert. It's messing around with our hormone levels. And when you mess around with your hormone levels, you're more likely to die eventually, to put it bluntly. So, so if we can have this awareness, have this knowledge, understand the mechanisms, then it becomes real. And from there, we can make smart choices and control our environment a little bit and feel better at the end of the day, feel better for in cheap and easy ways.
And there's so much we can do. There are some things that are a little bit harder to change, like those, like the street lights, but like just getting out, in the first hour of when you wake up, getting out into the outdoor environment and just picking up that sunlight with your eyes and with your skin is such a fantastic way of setting a regular body clock. A lot of people are struggling with, they're waking up at different times each day. They can't really get their body clock in a set rhythm. And light at the beginning of the day is a fantastic way to start that. So would you recommend then, as sort of a practical way that people can influence these cycles, it's best to, with the environmental lighting you have, mimic the light that's happening naturally from the sun, essentially?
That's it. Yeah. So there's two things, isn't there? There's getting the natural light whenever you can, during the first thing in the morning and during the middle of the day. So that's one good thing. And then with the artificial light, just trying to mimic what life was like before we had artificial light. So dimming the lights in the evening. You might choose to it gets quite a complicated topic when we come to choice of artificial light, but you may choose just to use candlelight after maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, unless you actually need to have your lights on. Just make your house a little bit more cozy, chilled out, and there's salt lamps which give off a more subtle glow. With your flat screen devices, there are plenty of dimming apps you can choose now, which take away the bright white and blue light and create a softer orange glow to the screen. So some new smartphones have come with these nighttime modes built in, but for old smartphones and for laptops, you can download an app such as Flux, that's F-LUX, and that will automatically, depending on your location, dim your screen at the right time of day. So there's plenty of ways to do this.
Yeah, and I've even seen now, for those people who maybe can't get those apps on their device, or they are unable to change the screen brightness, there are blue blocking glasses as well that are starting to help people. And something that I've really noticed is, I've got blue blocking glasses myself and they do really help, but Excellent. I also have those apps on my devices. But something that really makes a difference for me is, like you were saying, adjusting the lighting as best you can. Now, you don't have to change all of your bulbs in your house or your bedroom. What I've done is just have one lamp in my bedroom, which is fitted with a red bulb, a dimmer red bulb. And I'm sure, for people who aren't really clued up on lighting, you can go to a store and ask, a salesperson about this, and they'll be able to really help you get the right bulb. But there's, there are red and orange bulbs, which I find really help me. They kind of mimic that firelight or the candlelight that we have experienced for hundreds of thousands of years. And it really starts to lull me down into a really nice, getting prepared for sleep mode of mind.
That's it. Yeah. And it can take a while to kind of change that habit, because we may have kind of conditioned ourselves to kind of rev ourselves up in the evening. It might be to do some extra emails for work, or to get through the next episodes of Netflix series that you're watching. I must watch an episode every night, or your favorite program. So we have to be patient and give ourselves a little bit of time to allow ourselves to calm down in the evening and prepare for bed. So what you said about just having one light that's dim or orangey red color is a perfect suggestion. You can still buy some, even though they're not as environmentally friendly. From an energy consumption point of view, you can still buy incandescent light bulbs. So the old, the ones with a little curly bit of wire inside them. Yeah. You can still buy them on eBay or Amazon if you just want that one light in your house. Yeah. And the other point about them is that in winter, the argument that they are not environmentally friendly because they waste energy is kind of true, but if you look at it another way, it's not so much true, because they're not so efficient in kicking out. They use more energy to kick out the same number of lumens as light, and that's because they give off heat as they, the extra energy goes away as heat. But actually, in winter, when you want the lights on more, you also want to heat your house more. Usually, well, we do in England anyway. So actually it's contributing to the warmth of your house. And if you've got a good thermostat, then it will kick off, that heat isn't wasted. It's actually gently heating the room. Whereas if you've just got the bright white LED lights, which might not use as much energy to produce the light, they're not kicking out any heat. So it depends how you look at it. I think the old bulbs aren't necessarily as bad as we've made them out to be. That's my opinion.
Yeah, fair play. I mean, I managed to get hold of an orange-red LED bulb, and that fits me perfectly. Yeah. So yeah, people out there, I'm sure you can spend some time looking on the internet or go to your local store. They'll be able to sort you out. Right, it'd be great to move on to the next polarity now, because we could talk about light and dark for the whole episode, and it's such a deep topic. But another extremely important one is that feasting and fasting cycle, which a lot of people also have out of rhythm, or they're not really conscious that there is a critical rhythm there.
Yeah. So we just spent a while explaining that light is the big thing that kind of programs our body clock, but actually food influences our body clock as well. So and our body clock influences when we get hungry. So it's a two-way street. But taking a break from food or fasting, it's we all do it all the time anyway. When we're sleeping, we're not eating. When we're working, most people aren't eating. So we all fast for certain amounts of time. But the idea of fasting is often associated with a kind of suffering or deprivation, or it's equated to the idea of starvation, which is when it's forced on someone, and people may end up dying at the end of it. Fasting is a voluntary act, and it can even be a pleasurable act. It's a chance to learn about ourselves, and it doesn't have to be extreme either. It can just mean having breakfast a little bit later in the morning and stopping eating earlier in the evening. It's easy for many people to get into a habit of snacking late at night. Let's say it's past 8 or 9 o'clock, or even eating their meals past 8 or 9 o'clock, which in itself isn't that bad. But then if you've got to get up early for work the next day, and you might have your breakfast before, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning, then you've only taken a break. You've taken less than 12 hours break from food. And it appears that when you do that, that's a real, creates a real risk for your health. So at the very minimum, we should fast for 12 hours a day. The science behind that, the science to back this up is being carried out at, there's new papers coming out pretty much every week to explore how fasting influences our health. Some people might think that when you stop eating, your body kind of shuts down and everything stops, but actually the reverse is true. Many processes activate when we stop eating. So one of these is we switch from carb burning mode or sugar burning mode to fat burning mode. And you may have heard of this idea of ketosis or ketogenesis or the keto diet.
Yeah.
And this really, the word ketone or ketosis or ketogenesis is, all it's referring to is the fact that your body is chopping up long molecules of fat into smaller chunks so that you can utilize it as fuel. And it's a very normal and it's a very healthy thing for the body to do that. And when you fast, there's two ways of doing it. One way is that you eat a low carb diet and then eat more carbs and more fat and protein, and that will switch your body into fat burning mode. But the other way to do it is just to take an extended pause from eating, to fast, and then your body will activate the fat burning mode, and that's good for you. It's good to be adaptable and flexible. Metabolic, it's this term metabolic flexibility, which just means that your body is able to adapt. It's part of being resilient. It doesn't have to constantly rely on a trickle of carbs and sugar in order to liberate energy. It can liberate energy in more than one way. So that's one benefit of fasting, is that it makes you adaptable and able to burn fat. The another big benefit is something called this process called autophagy, which is activated when we fast. So autophagy comes from the Greek, two Greek words, autophagy. So auto meaning kind of self, and phagy meaning to eat, because our white blood cells normally go around like Pac-Man and eat up bacteria, and they clean up our dying cells. So this phagy, this process is called phagocytosis. So they eat up debris and microbes. So that's normally a white blood cell coming along and eating up all this, garbage and things we don't want in our body. Autophagy is called self-eating, and that's when our cells clean up debris inside cells from the inside out. So it's not going along cleaning up and eating things outside of the cell. It seals this debris up and these damaged cell components into a kind of stomach inside the cell, and then it digests them from the inside. And it's part of a renewal process. And what was discovered is that this process of self-eating or autophagy is activated when we fast. So there we have another good reason to take a break from food. It allows our body to do a stock check and say, okay, I've been busy processing all this food for so long, I haven't had time to clean up my factory. I'm having a little pause from eating now. I'm looking around, okay, those cell components are damaged, they're not usable. I'm going to seal them all away and recycle them, and the overall health of the cell improves. It's a form of cell renewal. So yeah, that's, fasting is, it's been a practice in many cultures. It is still a practice in many cultures, but it's easy in our modern day culture when we've got, every food outlet offering delivery, or most food outlets offering delivery these days. You can even get desserts delivered to your doorstep late at night, ice cream and so on. It's so easy to get food all the time that we can forget to stop eating and forget these natural processes to kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as I speak now, I've done my daily fast up until this point, and I can definitely testify that, you know, it's not the right thing for me to do every day, but it's something that I really have found has benefited me. Just, you know, obviously I'm not in tune with the on a cellular level what's going on with my body and the cleaning of the debris that's going on in my cells, but actually just the way that I feel and the way that it's helped me reset my relationship with food. Because I think, you know, when we take ourselves out of the benefits that are happening on a deep level in our body, actually the relationship we have with food in society, you know, there's a lot of emotional eating going on, a lot of medicating with food. And I think it's good to be able to have place your own choice in your relationship with food, and be able to listen to the signals. And if I get up and I'm not really that hungry, and I've got a schedule that's allowing me to, you know, nothing maybe massively strenuous in the morning, I'll just do a fast until midday. Would you say then the best protocol for people to use is whatever is feeling best for them, and almost like listening to their hunger, the true hunger, and not the I want the food? It's, oh, my stomach is rumbling, I feel quite empty, I need to have some food now.
Great question, really good question. Because those signals can be a bit confusing to start off with. So we might think that stomach rumbling, we equate that with, right, I need to eat straight away. But actually, it might not mean that. It might just mean that your body is getting used to having a break from food, and it's diverting, you know, it's diverting blood and resources to other areas of your body. So the model with all these 6 polarities, I encourage people to, I call it the three C's approach, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. But it's especially relevant to fasting. So the 3 C's stand for curiosity, capacity, and confidence. And if you've got these 3 attributes when it comes to exploring health, then you'll be fine. You know, pretty much you can carry out your own investigations and health journey. So curiosity is what brings your viewers and listeners here today. It's they're keen to find out more, and you kind of have to have that. Without, you know, it's the old phrase, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. If you're not curious about improving your own health and curious about wanting to explore something like fasting, there's no point trying it. You can't impose it on someone who doesn't is not interested. But if you've got curiosity alone isn't enough. We have to have some capacity and confidence. So the capacity comes in the form of information, maybe some science, good science, to understand, okay, there's this thing called fasting. Is it just a scam, or a fad, or is there something to it? If we look at the information and form an opinion based on some useful facts and figures and research, then that's helpful. Next, we have to say, okay, I'm curious about this. I've got the information, but what do I do with it? There might be 101 protocols for fasting. There are so many methods for fasting. Which one do I choose? And that's the confidence part. So that's where, you know, we have to go for an approach that guides us in a useful way. So the reason I just went through those 3 C's is because I do agree with you that we should be listening to our body, and we should be playful and curious about something if we're trying something new, like fasting for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, having said that, if you've never fasted before and you're used to eating, you know, late at night and early in the morning and grazing all the time, then there may be a period of struggle or adaptation for a few days whilst you get used to it. And that's when it's useful to follow someone else's protocol. So the 16-8 diet, or the 16-8 protocol, is quite a good one to start with for some people. Actually, if you're eating for if you're eating for more than 12 hours a day, then I'd start with just saying, okay, just get to not eating till after 8 in the evening, and don't eat the next morning until after 8. So get to 12 hours first, and then get used to that for a few days, and then try something like the 16-8, which is where you only eat for an 8-hour window in any one day. So that might be, like you said, you fast till midday, and then finish all of your food and calorific drinks and beverages by 8 in the evening.
Yeah.
So it may feel a bit weird and uncomfortable, and you might get a few hunger pangs for the first few days. But if you do your research and listen to people who have done fasting regularly, and you realize it gets easier and easier every time you do it, and the benefits you feel improve every time you do it. So like you said, you feel great. And one of the things that happens when our body switches to fat burning mode, the ketones which are produced are a very kind of clean burning source of fuel for the brain. So people often report that they feel a great sense of mental clarity when they're fasting. And there may be a period of adaptation when you feel a bit tired and grumpy, but that doesn't usually last for long, and it certainly doesn't increase. It gets to a point where a kind of breakthrough point where the ketones kick in and you start to feel really good. So yeah, it's a case of listening to your body, but also not kind of thinking, oh, my body, I'm craving a Krispy Kreme donut, so I must go and get it. You don't have to listen to everything that your body gets. Just listen to it in a way that you're trying to understand it, and understanding what these signals might mean, and without labeling them.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that you mentioned the element of playfulness and experimentation. With I think all of these polarities that we're talking about today, a lot of it is about finding what works for you, because we're all biologically different in what the exact needs that we might have. Some people are more resilient to some things, and some people are less so. And yeah, the food thing and the feasting and fasting is really down to a personal preference and seeing what works best for you. So that's a fantastic model that people can use. I think the 12-hour is a fantastic way for people to start, because it's not particularly onerous and people probably wouldn't be getting super hungry in that time. The 16-8 is a great progression on from there, and you can use those models as a starting point for experimentation, and really you can just jump off from there. People can do 24-hour fasts, but that's something that you shouldn't jump into straight away. It's definitely a better idea to try and get at least a regular 12-hour fast going, and that will really help your body. The next polarity is calmness and arousal, and I was wondering if you could talk about that the point of balance in our life and how we are maybe slightly off from that.
Yeah, thank you. So calmness and arousal. This, we've all felt times in our lives when we felt super alert and, excited about something, or stressed, or worried about something, to the point where we feel a little bit restless, and we felt really joyful and excited, and had a surge of energy, and it's felt we felt energized. So what happens in those situations is a certain part of our nervous system is activated, or it's dialed up, I should say, because it's active all the time. And people might have heard of the fight or flight response versus the rest and digest response. So these are like two different teams or departments in our nervous system. part of something called the autonomic nervous system, which controls things in our body that we don't have to usually voluntarily think about. So the amount of blood that goes to our muscles that help us walk and run, the amount of the speed at which our heart beats, the amount of blood that goes to our digestive system. So they're complementary but opposing systems in our body. One is for keeping us alert and helping us do work and back in the day run away from big threats or defend big threats. The other side is for nourishment and growth and for sleep and for taking in food, digesting that food, assimilating it into new body parts so that we can keep renewing ourselves. Now, really what it's all about is about energy management and energy budgeting and diversion. So our body has evolved over billions of years to think, right, I don't actually need to do all of these functions at once. I don't need to go out and work in the fields or, fight a battle at the same time as eating a meal and digesting and sleeping. So it's kind of separated these activities out, and it said I'm going to divert energy to each of them whenever I need them. Now, which is ingenious really, because we might be able to multitask to a certain extent, but we can't do everything all at once. So it's created these two arms of our nervous system. Sometimes they're referred to as the sympathetic and parasympathetic, fight or flight, rest and digest. And they're dialed up and dialed down depending on this, again, the signals that come into our body, lights, perception is a big one. So work stress, for example, makes a lot of people super alert and agitated. Deadlines, noise, music. So, and this is where we can get into the realm of perception as well. So if we perceive something to be worthy of agitating us or alarming us or a threat, then that will dial up the sympathetic or the fight or flight side of our nervous system, and it will suppress the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, which so there's this constant kind of dialing up and dialing down of these different parts of our nervous system, the calmness and arousal. And for some people, it will, they'll spend more time in the calm state versus the aroused state, and other people will spend more time in the aroused state than the calm state. And neither is necessarily good or bad. But what we do know is if you're chronically switched on all the time, then this affects, again, our hormonal systems. And we talked about the links between hormones and cancer, but there's links between this kind of stressed out, alert state and other chronic diseases as well, heart disease. It's believed that that it leads to chronic fatigue conditions like fibromyalgia from being switched on too much for too long. So really this polarity, calmness and arousal, is just to say, to do a bit of an assessment. Am I hyper alert too much? Do I need to spend some time on myself, doing some kind of meditative activities, or just, doing something I enjoy, doing a little bit more of a hobby, or a bit of peace and quiet, listening to some relaxing music, something to calm the nervous system down and restore balance in that area of your life.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic practical bit of advice. Just look for creating space in your life where you can do those classic activities that let you slow down. And they don't have to be, meditation is a fantastic way. It's personally helped me quite a lot. Even if, the rest of the day I have is quite busy and it's got me in that state of like hyperactivity or arousal. The meditation at least will leave me a 20-minute period where my body can get into that mode, and I feel like I've been reset in a way. But also, it can work with activities like reading, or some people really enjoy like making crafts. I've experienced, I did a bit of like woodworking when I was at school, and I remember the process of woodworking, especially when working by hand, that really relaxed me. And I like, again, with the feasting and fasting, I think different things will work best for everybody. But would you recommend that a good starting point is just finding a still activity such as meditation to get going on?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, that's a good, it comes back to that confidence, doesn't it? Choosing something which is tried and tested, which other people
Yeah.
recommend. Having said that, if a person knows that something like woodwork or a hobby that they used to do, but they've just kind of not found the time to do it recently because they've been so busy or so stressed, if they know that that makes them feel better, then return to that and try and schedule some time in for it. It doesn't have to be the kind of mindfulness or meditation techniques that are very popular at the moment. It can be, as you said, a hobby, but really it's about trying to do it deliberately and with awareness. So because you could end up doing a pastime or a hobby in a stressed state with your mind still worrying about whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
And it won't be as effective on calming the nervous system if you do it with the intention, right, I'm going to do this activity now for myself to calm down, and you maybe put some nice music on or whatever as you do the hobby. And it's like training yourself. It's like going to the gym to train a muscle. You're training your calm muscle. And then ultimately, I believe the goal is to be able to create that state outside of the chosen activity. So create that sense of calm, not just when you're doing your favorite hobby, and not just when you're meditating or using a meditation app. It's to be able to evoke it and summon it up in your body when at will and during potentially challenging situations. So when you are busy when there is the deadline at work, or when you're in a kind of potential conflict with friends, family, colleagues, whatever, it's to be able to say, okay, this situation has got the potential to kind of send my stress levels through the roof. But if I can evoke the state which I have learned to create through a pleasurable activity or a meditation practice, then we become masters of our own physiology.
I think, a great starting point for people to be able to come into that mindful state, whatever they're doing, is just to be able to experience or bring your attention to the bodily sensations which are happening in that moment. So if maybe your thing is taking a walk around the park, you could really place your attention on the feeling each footstep takes on the ground and the sounds that you're hearing. Maybe there are birds in the trees, and thoughts just are naturally going to come along. Thoughts are just naturally generated, but if you get distracted by your thoughts, it's really important just not to beat yourself up and say, "Oh, I got distracted again." When you were saying that training the calm muscle, you have to realize that, coming to this from a modern life standpoint, the mind is sometimes quite overactive, and it needs quite a lot of time to be able to calm down, and quite a lot of training. So really don't beat yourselves up if you find yourself, trying to do a calm activity and the mind keeps on distracting you. All you have to do is just say, okay, I've realized I've been distracted, come back to the activity. Can seem like a little bit of a game, but actually it does get a lot easier over time, and the mind does ease quite a lot.
You're spot on, absolutely spot on. And I like that point, that reminder that not to beat yourself up if you're trying to do something like meditation and you think, oh, my mind just keeps sending these thoughts in, and it's actually going back to our first point about our body always being on our side. The monkey mind, or this this constant stream of thought that seems to play through all the time. It's actually a useful thing as well, although too much of it is not helpful. But the wonder of being a human is that we can reflect on the past and predict in the future, and all kinds of that. It's not just a feature of humans. Animals have got these qualities as well, but it's just about how recognizing it, not getting caught up in a thought that's not helpful or is going to cause us unnecessary agitation, and recognizing it as for what it is, as you said, is just a thought.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really powerful stuff. And now it'd be great to transition on to the actual physical movement and stillness that can really have an impact as well. I was wondering if you could take us through that point of balance.
Yeah, so we've got these bodies that allow us to do incredible things, and they've evolved, and we've ended up with the human body over billions of years for a reason. It's not just my arms and legs weren't just put onto me for the sake of it. They allow me to move, and the fact that I can reach my arm up and move my legs and knees and feet in a certain way is part of me. So but the only thing is that modern day society again often restricts, or it can limit how fully we take our body through all its range of motions and possibilities of movement. So I talked about running earlier. I like running. I don't do as much as I used to, but it's quite a linear, fixed way of moving. So it's kind of like a train track type motion, compared to something like dancing, or compared to something like gardening, where I'm digging and bending, or cleaning the house even. So even when we're exercising, we can be quite limited in how we move. Worse than that is sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day and focusing on work for so long that we don't get up, we don't stretch, we don't wriggle our body around, we don't shake, because all the fluid in our body gets a little bit stagnant. It can put a strain on the sitting with our legs hunched up to our chest puts a strain on our circulatory system, and it stops lymph from flowing around the body. So staying still and stagnant is kind of, for too long, is one of the worst things we can do for our health. So I encourage people to try and get a good variety of different movements each week. So that includes some aerobic exercise like running or cycling or swimming, some kind of more resistance training. So we've got to kind of keep pushing our body to the limits a little bit, just so that it adapts and responds and we become more resilient. But then also some purposeful movements. You talked about kind of mindful walking a moment ago. So you're concentrating on the way the foot lands on the floor as we walk, the sounds around us. There's lots of different purposeful movement techniques. Tai Chi is one of them. Yoga is another. So to mix the different types of movement, I call it a kind of exercise spice mix, because they say that variety is the spice of life, and I think we can apply that principle to movement. So not just choosing one type of exercise and doing it all of the time, So create as much variety. That's one principle when it comes to movement and stillness. The other we touched on earlier is that not to get too addicted to exercise. Some people use it as a coping mechanism for too much stress in their life because of the endorphin release and so on. But if it gets to the point where you can only cope with the stresses of maybe the mental stresses in your life, if you can keep up a certain number of miles a week on your, bike or running, or going to the gym, then that's not, it's not healthy either. And also too much being on the go and rushing around too much will activate that sympathetic part of the nervous system, will be too arousing. So when it comes to that polarity, movement and stillness, that's what I'm talking about. It's getting, it's using our body every day in some way, in a playful way, but not going over the top with it.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome that you mentioned like the variety being the spice of life, and you really need a varied diet of exercise, because movement can, there's just so much in there when you're talking about movement. There are those very like linear patterns of, say, just like walking and running, where you use the analogy of going along the train track, but there's so much more like creative movement we could be doing, and it's about having a space for all of those in our life, to be able to help our body maintain itself. Because if our body is finding that we're not using certain systems, it's going to take away resources from those systems, I'm sure. If a classic example is just that the musculature that we have on our body, if I decided to just lie in bed for a week and not get up, the muscle in my leg would decrease by the end of the week. Maybe not by loads, but it's just a signifier of the fact that our body needs this movement as a normal part of life. But also, interweaving into some of the other polarities, I think a lot of these things are synchronous. So the rest that you're taking in terms of your sort of calmness and arousal, maybe you're meditating, or maybe you're sitting and reading, that's also a nice chance for your body to be still and take the rest that it needs from that movement. Because as you were saying, the body, when it's moving in more strenuous ways, it's entering that sympathetic nervous system. So I think there's a fantastic way that the polarities can interplay, and we can leverage multiple levels of the polarities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can double up on all. You don't have to think, oh God, there's these 6 polarities. I have to touch in with 12 different things each day. Some of them do go hand in hand, like you say. So the stillness and maybe even the fasting and the darkness can go together. So you're winding down in the evening, going to stop work, do something more slow and mindful movement like Tai Chi or yoga, on an empty stomach, and then you've covered all those 3 of those bases in one.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, moving on to the 5th, which is connection and independence. It's a really interesting one to put in there, because I see the connection element of it. There's a really important part of human life is being connected to other people, but I think there's also a massive element about being connected to ourselves. And I'm really glad that you put the connection into independence part in there, because I think it's so valuable for people to hear.
Yeah, that's it. So you're quite right there. Connection to ourselves is important as well as connecting to other humans, because we can become disconnected from ourselves, and we can become disconnected from other people. And sometimes, people get so disconnected they can feel disconnected from everything, and that's a really terrible place to be. So, just to put that into context, or to give some examples, someone might be at a party with, lots of people around them, but they feel lonely or they feel disconnected from the people around them. So it's not necessarily just about having people around you or not. There are other times, other people in, maybe you yourself, you're quite happy with your solitude, but you feel connected to yourself, or you feel connected to the activity you're doing at the time, or connected to nature, or connected to your pet, stroking your pet, or whatever. So really a sense of connection is linked to this. It's kind of linked to the arousal calmness polarity, in really what we're wanting is our body to feel safe when we're connected. And if we feel safe around other people, or safe on our own, or safe when we're in nature, or safe with our pets, then we'll feel this sense of connection. And it's when all the barriers come down, the feel good chemicals are released in our body, and the body can enter this repair state as well. So and it's a signal for the body that everything's okay, we're doing okay, the world is a safe place, it's safe to be alive, it's safe for your body to heal and to grow. But going back to the whole idea of us being social beings, that's how we regulated ourselves throughout history, wasn't it? It's through this pack or this tribe mentality, and it was that glue that held us together. We survived better in a group. We were able to achieve more than we could on our own, and the way that we regulated that is through this sense of safety and connection.
Yeah.
So so that's what that polarity is about.
I think there's a really critical thing to emphasize as well. When you are taking your independent time, I think it'd be really easy to take your independent time and not really be independent, because we're going to talk about the technology and nature aspect of the polarities, but a lot of people will spend time on their own, which is actually a really valuable chance for reflection, thinking about your life and coming into a state of stillness, working with a lot of those other polarities. But we'll just flick through Facebook and Instagram and maybe start to be excited and triggered by a lot of these things that we're experiencing through the phone.
That's it. Yeah, that's a really good point. So they might be, as you said, they might be in away from other people, but they might be consciously or unconsciously reaching for a connection with other people, or reaching for a connection to, or reaching for arousal or stimulation. So it may not be independence in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's bringing awareness to that. So again, maybe there's no absolute right or wrong in any of these, but it's just having a curiosity of how we're reacting in any particular time or state, and what that does to our body, how it makes us feel. So some people might think that they need the social media all the time, or need their work all the time, but is it really creating a sense of safety and calm, or is it stressing me out on some level? And I love my work, but I know if I work too much, then I can get worked up and stressed about it, and that's not good for my health. So there's a fine line between having a sense of purpose and achievement and accomplishment, and overwhelm or addiction to something.
Yeah, and I think the connection independence polarity really is something that people have to experiment with themselves and have a good connection to themselves to be able to establish, because there is a big variety of sort of set points that we have individually about how much social interaction we need. And a nice way is really just being mindful of how things are making you feel at that time, rather than just sort of mindlessly going through with whatever you've got planned. Like sometimes you may have set something up with a friend, and you've been looking forward to it for ages, and then on the day you find that you just really need your own space. You just get this feeling through, and you're feeling that resistance to this thing coming up. And actually it can be detrimental to the friendship if you go along to that meeting and sort of carry that with you, that feeling of actually I really wanted this time for myself. So it's really about being able to listen to your internal voice and see what's best for you. And, we can recommend connecting with that inner voice, but it's down to each individual person to be able to listen to it. And so I think this interplays really nicely with the nature and technology element of your plan, because that is a balance point which also interacts, I think, with so many of these others.
Absolutely, yeah. So nature and technology, I really struggled when to kind of decide on whether to call that a polarity or not, because there is this whole argument that everything is natural because it's from planet Earth. Even our technology is natural, and technology is so many things are technologies that might not necessarily be like the obvious machines and electrical devices. So I just want to say that they're two words I've chosen that really they're the best. They're the best words I could choose to say what I wanted to say. And really what it's about is the effect it's having on our well-being. So in the book, when it comes to technology, I talk a lot about electromagnetic fields, and I kind of explain how our modern technology is interacting with our biology, with the surface of our cells, with our biological processes, and that this is actually creating a stressed state for our body. In a similar way that we talked about the light, artificial light influences our body clock, but electromagnetic fields given off by modern day electrical devices can open up channels in the surface of our cells and cause electrolytes to flow in or out of the cell. So I don't want to get too technical here, but if anyone has ever had an electrolyte drink, and that might be a sports recovery drink, or it might be the kind of salts you have after a bout of diarrhea to replace your electrolytes. Really what you're taking into your body are the ions, the charged molecules that your body needs to create a kind of battery that charges, that powers biological processes. So every process in our body, or most processes in our body, require some kind of energy currency called ATP to operate. So it stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it's this triphosphate, this phosphate group, this charged phosphate, that allows us to carry out energy intensive processes. So the way that we generate ATP is through a movement of electrons and protons in the surface of something called mitochondria. Now, it's the mitochondria, like these little bacteria-like organisms that decided to live, that we cooperated with billions of years ago, and they help us liberate energy from food. They help us generate ATP, and this powers our living processes. So really, the point I'm trying to get across is for us to keep our batteries charged, our cellular batteries charged, and to keep energy for carrying on living, we need to have these electrolytes in the right place and at the right time to separate charge, in the same way that a nickel cadmium battery has to separate charge so that it has the voltage to drive electrons through a circuit to power a light bulb or whatever the battery is doing. Our body needs these electrolytes in the right places to run life. Now, what happens is that when our cells are sensitive to electromagnetic fields, and there's electromagnetic fields all around us. Sunlight is on the electromagnetic spectrum. The Earth has its own electromagnetic fields. Humans give off electromagnetic fields. But when we have certain types of electromagnetic fields from devices, Wi-Fi routers, electrical cables running through our house, it's been shown that these cause the ion channels in our cells to open and allow charged electrolytes to flow in and out of the cell. And what that does is it depolarizes the cell. So it's like draining the charge out of a battery. And it can also create a kind of chaotic state inside the cell, which then leads to inflammation. And too much inflammation for too long is not a good thing. And this is it's at the root of lots of chronic inflammatory diseases. So really, that I don't want to kind of be alarmist about this, because I think our bodies are tough and resilient. But I think that there's a lot of evidence to show that our exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields and technology does have an effect on our biology. How dangerous it might be, I don't think there's a universal agreement on that yet. There's lots of people saying that it is damaging our health. So I think before there's a consensus formed around this, and before we've got kind of absolute proof, we can take the precautionary principle and take a break from technology every so often, just in the same way as, taking a break from too much arousal, too much light, too much food and feasting, too much exercise. We just take a break from technology and allow our bodies to rest from it and recover and recharge.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other end of that polarity being nature, I think, is so valuable, because it's such a obviously, just spending time away from the technology allows you to be in a more natural state personally. But if you actually use that time to spend time in nature, there's so many mechanisms there that are going to be able to put your body into a more restful state. And say you have a higher level of inflammation because of lifestyle factors. Maybe you're getting stressed by looking at social media and emails, and that's causing inflammation in your body. Spending time in nature and rebalancing that relationship with technology is going to be able to put your mental health in a better place and calm that nervous system, and hopefully bring down inflammation as well. It's a really powerful thing to be able to do in your life.
Absolutely. And, the science is backing that up more and more. So there's some interesting studies that looked at if you go for a walk in the woods, for example, the fragrances and the essential oils that are given off by trees do, as we breathe them in, they modulate our immune system and our nervous system, so they can have a calming effect and a beneficial health giving effect. Same with the bacteria in soil. So if you're out gardening or if you're playing around in the woods, then there's certain bacteria in the soils that modulate our immune system again and make us healthier and more resilient. So I think we've come from an environment where there's lots of trees and plants and wildlife and the sounds of nature and the smells of nature, and that we've lived side by side to those for so long. They're kind of like that those social interaction, we talked about human social interaction, but we've had this interplay of signals from nature for so long. But when we step away from that completely for too long, then we're missing out on something. I feel, and I think there's science to back that up.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that a lot of the things that we're discovering scientifically now, we're proving through the scientific method, or learning more about. These are mechanisms that we have culturally known have been good for us, maybe not in a scientific sense, but we've valued them in terms of well-being for a long time, like having a varied diet and feasting and fasting and lots of these different elements about living naturally. We know that living as naturally as possible is going to benefit the way that our body can operate. And it's really great to see that science is coming to back this up now. But I think it's also important not to rely on needing to see, scientific evidence is extremely important in increasing our understanding of the human body, but also trust in your own instincts and the instincts of nature, because the complexities that exist in those systems in the natural world and in our bodies are a lot deeper than we understand currently. The whole reason why science is progressing is because we are expanding our knowledge into those areas. And a lot of the time, we're actually wrong. Like, science is essentially a trial and error test extended over time. And we learn from the patterns that we are recognizing. But also you can recognize your own patterns and be your own health scientist in a way.
Definitely. And it's no coincidence, I don't think, that that most people, when they're looking for their holiday choice, that special few weeks of the year when they want to go on holiday, they'll go to some beautiful location. They might want to be on the beach, or somewhere with a beautiful a view, or go more into the countryside, because I think intuitively people know that that's going to be a place where they can recharge and get the best antidote for the way that they've become depleted through too much exposure to all of these other ends of the polarity we've talked about.
Yeah, we're making that space for, let's say, when we go on holiday, to have that calmness, stillness, and connection with nature. But actually, I think the most valuable thing we can do is get to a stage where we don't need the holiday, in a sense that in my everyday life, I'm being able to connect to nature with those small touch points. It could even be walking down the street. If I live in the middle of London, there's the lovely parks there, but maybe I don't go past any parks on my way to work. I can still notice the trees. And there's a lot of research there's starting to be more research into fractals, and just looking at nature is a powerful thing for our eyes to see. It's got a calming mechanism. So to be able to start observing these things, even in your day-to-day life, you don't even need to maybe change any of the big behaviors, just to notice different things. That can have a big impact on our sense of balance and our connectedness to nature.
Wow, yeah, please do. If you've got any information about the fractal research on fractals, please do send it to me. And that, and then it's a really, really good point about noticing, because nature is around us. Where my house, it might feel like I'm built in a big city, in a city, but actually the ground I'm on is the same earth and the same planet as the forests of the Amazon. So there's the potential for nature and wildlife everywhere, and we can bring some of it into our living environments as well. I'm a big fan of houseplants, so that if as you say, there's perhaps some research saying that observing the fractal patterns and the geometry of leaves and plants has a calming effect, then we can bring that into our house through houseplants, and which make the room look good, and also several houseplants, several types of houseplants are supposed to be particularly good at absorbing harmful chemicals and cleaning up the air in our living spaces as well. So
Yeah.
Times of the year when we can't have the windows open to get as much of a air circulation as we can at other times of the year when we need to be a little bit careful about keeping heat in the house. So having plants around then can be beneficial in lots of ways.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered so much in the conversation, Ian. I think the model that you've been able to put out there, it's really hard to describe a lot of the mechanisms that are impacting us through just like the English language or normal language. But I think you've been able to summarize it really well with your six paradigm model or six polarity model, sorry. And I think it's a perfect place for people to be able to start taking a new perspective in life and start noticing, how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis, and if they are feeling in balance with these different polarities. There's so much more we could talk about because your wealth of knowledge is incredible, and there's a lot more in your book which is utterly fascinating. We'll have to book in another conversation to get onto all this stuff. But before I ask my last question of the interview, I was wondering if you could tell people, if they are interested, inspired with your work, where they could connect with you and maybe get hold of your book as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So my website is restoringbalance.life. So that's restoring balance is spelt as all one word, and then .life for life. So that's the way to access some free chapters from my book. You can download those just with your name and email address. That's the best place. That's the best place to go. You can also buy the book off Amazon. And I've got a Facebook page, but restoringbalance.life.
Brilliant.
And I would love to speak again. And I think the wisdom you've got and the breadth of knowledge you've got is quite special. So yeah, please do. Let's speak again sometime, and we can explore some of these topics even more deeply as well, because you can go quite in depth in any one of these topics.
Absolutely.
The polarities.
Absolutely. There's so much, the interplay of personal experience, scientific research is really, really exciting, because it gives us like I was just thinking through the conversation, the depth of knowledge we have now with the evolution of science, how we are understanding what's going on a cellular level is really exciting, and it's helping us to understand as an informative tool, how we can live our lives in a better way. So as my last question of the conversation, if it may be a tricky thing to do, but if you were to just recommend, or if you had a magic wand and you were going to cast a spell on the world and they were going to have to do one habit a day, not necessarily a health habit, but just one habit a day to make their life better, what spell would you cast on everybody?
So I think you actually said this a few minutes ago. It's to ask ourselves often, how do I feel like right now, with a kind of open and non-judgmental point of view. So when I say open and non-judgmental, so we're not cursing ourselves if we don't feel great. We're not blaming someone else around us if we're feeling a little bit rotten. But it's just noticing, how do I feel right now? Where do I feel it in my body? Is it in my stomach? Do I feel a tightness in my stomach? Do I feel a numbness around my chest area? Do I feel excess pressure in my head? So just to become aware of those subtle sensations before, like we said at the start of this talk, before they become painful and before they turn into something else, or before we have a big, outburst of emotion, which happens sometime. But just to kind of, tune into how we feel and to build that sensitivity, because then hopefully we'll find that can, when we're doing something like fasting or doing different types of exercise movements or exposing ourselves to different types of light, we'll then be able to say, okay, so I feel this way now, and then when I'm doing this other intervention, this other health intervention, how is that affecting me on a subtle level? And then, as you said, we can become our own health scientist, where we're measuring against how we feel. And I'd just like to say, it's not an easy thing to do overnight, because there's often so many different factors coming in that we're not even aware of, fluctuations in temperature, air pressure, even solar flare activity has been shown to affect our heart rate variability. So we can never totally know what's causing all these things, but it's a good starting point to look for patterns and trends and to know ourselves better.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my question, to ask as many times throughout the day, how do I feel right now in my body?
I think that's so valuable. And even if, you were saying about the solar flare, even if it's an environmental factor that maybe we can't influence in that time, just recognizing how you feel, how your body feels, can really make a big difference in, if it's something negative, just it might ease ever so slightly just by noticing it. And I think that's a lovely thing to leave people with.
Great. Yep. Absolutely. It can ease just by noticing it.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for taking the time for the conversation today. You've imparted a huge amount of value for everybody out there. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Tom. And it was a pleasure. And you added value, so it was a great conversation. Really loved it. Thank you.
Well, everybody out there, please do check out the Restoring Balance website. At least download the free sample and have a look through the book, because it is a fantastic guide for people. And it really is a great summary of so many different elements of health that can be so confusing. And I think one of the most powerful messages that I have learned from the book and your work is that we have the power to change our health outcomes. Things aren't set in stone, and we can make an awful lot of difference through the way that we're living our life, and that's through our day-to-day choices. So I think that's something to leave the listeners with, to think about. Thank you again, Ian, and to everybody out there who's been listening. Please do, if you've liked the conversation, share it with people who would be interested. Please follow us to hear more conversations like this in the future. And I hope you are all going to keep well. Stay true, everybody.